Hello, welcome to the Free Will Science and Religion podcast. I am Chandler Klebs, and I am talking in a stupid voice right now. But today I am here with George Ortega, David Joseph, and Michael Walsh. Okay, that's enough of that stupid accent. I have no idea what accent that was. But anyway, our topic for today is going to be about punishment and stuff like that. And so I'm going to turn over to David Joseph, and he can explain more what he'd like to talk to us about this.
Right. Okay. Felicia's asking to be let back into the call. So if
Oh yes,
someone wants to,
I
Cool.
see. Yes, I'll try to add her to the call.
right. Okay.
Okay, because this would be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps she'll be able to back me up and kind of put my ideas across a little bit better.
Yeah,
So
maybe
anyway,
so.
George, a few podcasts ago, we were talking about punishment, and I brought up the example of how when a child is running into a busy street, and you kind of grab the child's arm and you stop the child from causing an accident or injuring themselves or others, and that initial grab, that might be considered, somewhat of a punishment, or it might cause some discomfort, but it's going to save the child from further harm and causing further damage and everything else to other people. So my question was that after you've done that, the idea of trying to deter people from doing that again would mean that you would have to kind of get that child to one side and kind of slap that child in front of other children, and that would be the deterrent. You'd be saying, look, this is what happens if you try to run out into a busy street, So the idea of grabbing their arm, that's like the necessary evil, but the idea of deterring other children from doing the same behavior by slapping them, that is what I would say is causing me problems, if that makes sense to you.
Well, David, I've got to agree with you. In other words, like after you've properly reprimanded the child, then I think through the attitude of compassion and understanding, just really talk to the child and explain to them how it's just not in their interest or in the interest of the rest of the family for the child to kind of like be as careless as the child was. But I agree with you completely. Punishment should really only be used as a deterrent or a teaching tool. And see, the problem with the free will belief is that what happens is like it goes beyond that. With free will belief, you punish someone because they did something wrong and they deserve it. So we're basically trying to like minimize the necessary amount of punishment that we have.
But
Right, okay.
does that mean that, in effect, the same exact thing is happening? It's just that the reason for why you're doing it changes. Meaning, instead of retribution, you're doing the same thing to the person, more or less, but you're just changing the reason why you're doing it from retribution to a teaching mechanism to deter future occurrences of that thing that you're trying to prevent.
Well, actually, if we were to broaden the conversation from a child running into the road and talk about, assault, murder, felonies, we see a change in that, because rather than prison, like the U.S. prison system that just the recidivism rate is off the charts for so many different things, and instead turn it into something more like therapy and actual rehabilitation, the recidivism rates drop. So in the case of the child, rather than smacking him, instead would be the conversation about, this is why what you did was not a good thing and it's dangerous, and this is what you can do better next time.
Right.
So you're not actually doing the same thing for different reasons. Because the reasons are different, what you do is different.
Yeah, that was my point. That was the point I was actually trying to make, to be honest with you.
I do think that as far as punishment goes, the free will belief makes a difference in what type of punishment you do. Because take, for example, the death penalty. And even though I don't like the death penalty, I don't like capital punishment, there's a difference between crucifying someone, for example, because you believe that they deserve to suffer a painful, long death, because you believe in free will, you believe that they deserve suffering, as opposed to capital punishment, painless euthanizing, as a prevention from this person from doing further harm to society, but you're not doing it to cause pain to that person because you understand that they don't deserve pain.
That sounds good. Absolutely. And again, even like with criminals and children, another point is that like you're explaining to them, listen, we're not blaming you, explaining to them what had to happen. What happened had to happen. Don't feel really bad about yourself because you couldn't have done whatever you did any other way, but we have to take measures to protect society, to protect yourself, you and others in the future. So it's the perspective of explaining to the person that they're not in fact evil, they're not in fact bad, and like especially with criminals, if we want to reduce recidivism, that's really important, because to the extent that like society and judges and police and the media, newspapers are labeling people as horrible, criminals, that's going to be how they see themselves, and that's going to make it so much harder for them to like see themselves any other way.
And I shared on Facebook with Chandler, Trick, and maybe a couple others, I don't totally remember, an article I came across where if you alienate and isolate people who are abusing illegal substances like drugs, then they keep coming back and they're more likely to be addicted. Whereas if you, rather than say, you're a bad person, this is a bad thing, prison, etc., but instead set up something like therapy and help them get jobs and help them, establish a sense of community and identity, and instead feel better about themselves, they're more likely to quit the drug that they were on and not go back.
Right, yeah. I think it's more about addressing the root causes of their behaviors.
Rather than the symptoms, yes.
Exactly. I mean, if you just throw someone into a cell and you're trying to make their environment, you're trying to give them that amount of deterrence, so they think, I don't want to go to prison. That often doesn't work, because you're chucking someone into an environment that's going to make them even worse in some cases. How do you expect people to get better if you're putting them in a place that makes them worse? It's very confusing. And so George, because a couple of weeks, I think it was last week or the week before, you mentioned that there has to be a certain level of deterrence. So jails, for example, would have to be worse than the alternative to the outside world, to the criminal.
Yeah, I say this because as human beings, we're hedonic creatures, and that we're hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So, I think we still have to maintain our system of rules and laws, because I think there's a lot of people, if we didn't have them, they'd say, well, fine, nobody has a free will, but I want this and someone has it, I'm going to take it. It's like there has to be, I think, a minimum kind of requirement for that. But again, the free will belief just adds that additional component, not just the punishment required to recondition a person, to mold their behavior, so it's better the next time, but to punish them because they're evil.
Right, okay.
Another point, in terms of the positive approach, the approach of training these criminals, training people in jails and prisons, of giving them these resources so that when they come back into society, they can integrate much better. A lot of people, for example, if you suggest allowing convicts to get educated, to attend college or so. So many people say no, that we're not going to allow that because they're evil. How could you like allow a criminal, to attend college for free when so many people on the outside can't? And again, that perspective is completely founded on this mistaken belief in free will that they don't deserve it. So like to the extent that we would actually fund that, the society would benefit. The money we saved in the criminal justice system by them not going back and committing crimes would probably like create a lot more funds to have more people go to school for free.
Of course, we could also cut our insane military National Defense Fund in half, have plenty to do everything that we actually need to do with it, and instead fund education. So then maybe education itself could be free for everybody, like so many other countries who have managed that.
Felicia, I couldn't possibly agree any more, Felicia. I'm totally with you about that, because it seems like that countries spend so much money funding the military, which really could be used to prevent war if the societies were just happier in general, because that was being used to feed, clothe, educate people, do something more positive. I'm totally with you there.
Yeah. Not gonna lie, not really a fan of my country. Not a fan of our foreign policy. Not a fan of our economics. Not a fan
Whoa,
of...
you hate America? How dare you?
Oh, I know, right? I haven't celebrated the 4th of July since like the 8th grade. And I haven't stood for the Pledge of Allegiance since the 7th.
Yeah, you know what?
every time I hear a speech by Noam Chomsky on U.S. foreign policy, it does really, really, really make me hate America.
Yeah.
Independence Day doesn't mean anything to me anymore because I know no one has a free will. No one's independent.
It doesn't mean anything anymore because I look at what we did with that and all the people we hurt with that, and the Native American societies that were oppressed after that is just, I don't see it as something to celebrate.
Neither do I, Felicia. But it gets even beyond that. Why do we call it an independent country when everything we have is made in China?
That's a good point.
Yeah, I just the very thought that we're independent from other countries and that there's no causal connection between the U.S. and all these other countries was just that's a false belief right there. And so I view everyone of all countries everywhere as equal.
Well, I honestly view the Middle East as more like toddlers than equals, but yeah, essentially. If they're going to behave like adults, that would change. But while they're fighting over this is my land, no, this is my land, and they're using toddler logic, then
And actually all of us, I mean, consider our inaction on climate change. That is like so monumentally irresponsible. And the U.S. is leading that. I mean, my God. So yeah, we've got, our whole world has so much growing up to do. Guys, we've been exploring this issue of like punishment from the perspective of other people, criminals, children and all. How do we apply this understanding to ourselves? Because don't we a lot of times, like because of this conditioning that we have a free will, when we do things wrong, don't we tend to kind of like say, well, all right, we've done something wrong, we better punish ourselves?
This is a very good topic to bring up, George, because this is a very important understanding, because like take for example, when I came to the realization, wait, I grew up eating meat in my culture because that's the way people do things here. If I were to attribute free will and fundamental responsibility to myself, I would be thinking, oh no, I ate a turkey, I deserve to die. You know what I'm saying?
That might be a little bit of an exaggeration.
I know, but that's, Felicia, that's what it leads to. This whole eye for eye, tooth for tooth, this retribution, like, oh, you killed this thing, so you deserve to die. You did this, like, that gets weird. So it's tied in with this whole revenge thing, and so we can stop punishing ourselves because punishing ourselves will not fix the problem. Instead, all we can do is try to heal the damage that we may have done to others in the past once we become aware of it. That's how I look at it.
See, I actually and I agree in part and disagree in part. And the part I disagree more specifically is that while it would stand to reason, while it's logical that it would change significantly how we handle our own failures and shortcomings, is that it doesn't actually seem to, though, because we don't judge others on the same scale that we judge ourselves, because we know personally the things that have affected us. We know how we've grown up, our culture, our family, our influences, biology, and we empathize essentially with ourselves. And when we empathize with other people, it is harder to have big reactions to the bad things that they do, because you recognize where they've been and why they've done that. And so instead, not believing in free will helps you to judge others on the same scale that we already judge ourselves.
Exactly. I'm very glad you mentioned that, Felicia, because isn't that it? We are more understanding of ourselves than we are of other humans, because we're more aware of the causes that compelled us to do what we do. And so what we need to be doing is treating others the way we treat ourselves. You know, the whole love your neighbor as yourself sort of thing, in a way that kind of works under this understanding, because you realize this person is also caused to do whatever they do, good or bad, by their past. And so just as I don't deserve to die for all the way, like, I might step on a bug, but it doesn't mean I deserve to die. Same is true of other people, and so, yeah, I think you're totally right on there. We need to view others the way that we have been judging ourselves.
And I think ditching the idea of free will really helps that. And that was part of what helped me to ditch free will as well. I used to be, I'll go down this route. I read once in college a book on the psychology of rapists. And I went into it, of course, angry and expecting there to be absolutely no excuses. And I was still a Christian, so of course I supported the death penalty, because that logically follows half the time. And especially if you take into account the Old Testament. But instead, after reading it and seeing some of their lives, and some of the people that they interviewed took responsibility for their actions, and also talked about what led them to that, and the psychology, what they were thinking at the time. And instead, I felt empathy for them. I felt sympathy. And I realized that they weren't bad human beings because of that action, and that they were just hurt and broken just like everybody else. And as a result of their upbringing, often in abusive homes, helped create the stage for them to do that horrific crime.
Felicia, that's awesome, because in a sense what you're saying is overcoming the belief in free will enabled you to much better live up to the ideals of Christianity, of love thy neighbor and be forgiving in all. So that's... Go ahead.
The New Testament anyways.
Well, yeah. I mean, but yeah, because it makes it so much easier. I mean, if we believe in free will, yes, it's right to forgive, because it's the moral thing to forgive. When as we overcome this belief, we don't even have to forgive them, because we don't accuse them in the first place. We recognize that they're as absolutely innocent as everyone else. We still have to deal with what they did, but it just allows us even a higher level of compassion.
And it makes it easier. It's not the cognitive dissonance anymore, because it puts my empathy and my morality ethics on the same line as the logic.
This is really good what you guys talk about here, because there's a difference between, you know, forgiving because, the church tells me I have to forgive. And I'm like, well, but what George is saying is this is even better than forgiveness, because it's no longer something like, oh, I must forgive this person. No, instead you're realizing, wait, it's not really like you have to forgive anything, because they're not to blame to begin with. It's even better than what Christianity has to offer, if it has anything to offer at all. That's a whole other thing.
What about there was a study that came out, I think some university, where they had two groups of people, and they showed that, well, one of them was told that they have free will, and the other group was told that they didn't have free will. And the group that was told that they didn't have free will cheated on the test that was given to them later at a higher rate. And this was used by a lot of psychologists to try to make a case that we need to believe in free will, even if it's an illusion, because it makes people behave better. Has anybody heard that study or that argument?
Mike, not only have I heard of it, I included that study in my last book on free will. And basically what I discovered was that it was biased. In other words, like, they were actually priming, people who believe in free will to disbelieve it for the experiment, because it's very hard to find people, subjects that actually don't really believe in free will. So what they did is, like, with the unfree will belief group, they said, listen, you're nothing but a pack of neurons, you're just like, your chemistry, there's no real you. But with the free will believers, they said, well, because of your free will, you can choose to be moral. So one part of the flaw in their methodology was they were priming the free will believers to act morally, while they were priming the unfree will believers to just think of themselves as a pack of neurons and just this biochemistry.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. That's the problem with these studies, is that they're trying to equate free with good, and they're not the same thing at all. Because you have to think, why would a free will, even if that was possible, which we know it's not, why would that mean that you would behave more morally? In fact, it could just work the other way. A free will might allow someone to be more evil than anything we see. How do you know?
On my view, though, you see, I do think that it takes a certain level of philosophical knowledge to really, I think, handle the idea of non-free will. And I'm not 100% sure that a young person, like a kid, like an adolescent, could really handle the idea of non-free will. They might immediately jump to saying, oh, well, then I can do anything I want, and there's no responsibility. I can't be blamed. And that's a layperson's reaction to the idea of non-free will. We've all probably encountered that at some point. But would a 13, 14, 16-year-old really have the knowledge, the wide level of philosophical knowledge and social knowledge that is required for us, for example, to accept non-free will and still be good moral people? Does a child have that capability, or a teenager, or is the idea of non-free will something best kept for adulthood? Like, you educate someone and then, like, you lay it on them that there's no free will, or should young kids from the earliest age be raised with the idea of non-free will?
I think that there's a couple of different things to this that I think we're forgetting. One, that it's more difficult for children to grasp abstract ideas such as free will or determinism, and that, I think, would play a bigger factor into whether or not they grasp that concept than jumping to any conclusions such as, well, I can do whatever I want and there's no consequences. Second is whether or not we are actually presenting the whole concept. Because if you just say, there's no such thing as free will, anybody might jump to well, then there's no consequences. But that does not logically follow, because there are still consequences for your reactions, because we live in a society and we are societal creatures. So I think that when we present that idea, we have to tack on more than just there is no free will. And
well, that's my point is that is a young kid capable of that additional knowledge that's required, or is it something that's a little too sophisticated for someone below a certain age?
I don't think that I don't think there's going to be a standard age, because some kids grasp abstract thoughts better than others at any age. There's not going to be a standard there. I think that if we honestly believe this is the truth, then that's what we should be teaching our kids, rather than teaching them something that we know is a lie, in the hopes that it'll make their behavior better. Because we've already talked about how believing in free will has some negative side effects, such as blaming others, capital punishment, etc. So I definitely would not want to raise kids believing something I already believe is harmful.
There's another part of this that may help us find an answer. Back up in 2011, New Scientist came out with the first cover story refuting free will, their magazine. And in it, they cite a study that was conducted in 1998 where they asked 40,000 people from 35 countries whether they believed in free will or not, and about 30% of them didn't. So now, I don't know where these people are. I don't think they're here in the United States, but it may be that certain societies that we really haven't studied well have already adapted this non-free will perspective, and hopefully it's worked for them. Hopefully it's worked for them across the board.
Probably, I think the countries who have already adopted rehabilitation versus punishment into their legal system, I would wonder if there's a correlation between that and ideas of free will.
I wanted to respond to what Michael Walsh was saying, because I think that that children are capable of understanding why we don't have a free will. And this might be controversial here, as usual, but kids understand right from the beginning that things have a cause. They're always asking, well, why is this way? Why? I call that, the 2-year-old syndrome, the why syndrome, And so I think that what needs to be done is that, as long as we let kids have their natural understanding, well, yes, everything has a cause. I mean, it's just so obvious. And then from that, this person did this because they wanted that, and they had to do this, do that, and the reason why you don't run out in the street is because you'll get squashed. Look what happened to that squirrel over there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? But it gets the message across that there's a reason. Like that's the thing, is like, and even though I'll probably never have kids, it's probably for the benefit of the world that I don't. But but I just want to say, like, I wouldn't necessarily just start out teaching them all the philosophy about why there's no free will, but I want them to understand the reason or cause for everything that I do and what other people do. And if you have that understanding, then that will guide you through just about everything in life. That's important. Why does the world work the way it does? Understanding the psychology of people. So that would be the route I would go if I did have kids.
And then I want to add on to that, because I think that's a really great way to handle the causal side of not having free will. And then there's also, of course, the biological side. And one of the really, really simple things that helped me actually when I was older, but it would definitely work for kids, is that when I was still a Christian and believed that homosexuality was a choice and a sin, in an unrelated act, I was tired of my favorite color being blue. It had been blue for a decade, okay? I was tired of saying blue. Everybody else was saying blue. Blue is apparently a very popular color. So I tried to change my favorite color to purple because it was time for a change. Well, it didn't exactly work like I had planned because no matter how hard I tried to just decide my favorite color was purple, it was still blue. I still bought blue clothes. I still favored things that were blue versus things that were purple, even if I thought my favorite color is purple. Why is my favorite color blue? I don't know why. It just is.
That's,
Once I realized that I don't choose my favorite color, I started thinking, well, do I choose the food that I like? No, I just like certain foods. What about, I lived in an all-girls dorm. It was a Christian college, with a suite to a total of 8 girls, which is a disaster in the making. And of course, the topic of boys comes up, and I'm like, well, okay, well, why is it that she likes one certain body type, but I don't like that at all? I don't choose which men or women that I find attractive. I just do. And even kids grasp the idea that they have a favorite color and they don't know why.
Yes, and you know what, Felicia? I'm so glad that you brought that up because as far as favorite color, yeah, about like take even the simple thing of a favorite color. When I was a kid, for the longest time, actually, up until my 20s, actually, red was like my favorite color. And then I figured out, well, why is my favorite color red? And I figured out the ketchup. It's got to be the ketchup because I love the taste of ketchup. I didn't choose to like the taste of ketchup either, but I like ketchup. Ketchup is red. The inside of watermelon is red. I like the taste of watermelon. And I started noticing, hey, even my blood is red. Like, I started seeing the causal influences that led to me liking the color red.
all right, guys, this has been another great episode. Chandler, we're a bit, over, so I guess you might want to wrap it up. You want to kind of let an overview before we wrap up?
Okay, yeah, well, this has been a very interesting discussion that we've been having about punishment and understanding fully what it means not having a free will. And I mean, I just go on forever. But anyway, well, we'll be covering everything we've discussed and more in future episodes of Free Will, Science, and Religion. Thank you and goodbye.